The smell of stale coffee and fast food hit me first. Then the cracked vinyl dashboard. Then her laugh through the rain-streaked window. Chloe tilted her head back, mouth open, her perfect blonde hair spilling over her shoulders. Ethan leaned across the sticky diner table, his hand covering hers like he was shielding her from the world. I sat in his car. Our car. The engine ticked as it cooled. He'd left it running. He'd left me running. 1 hour. He said he'd be 5 minutes. 1 hour of sitting here, watching my fiancé feed French fries to his work crush, while I dissolved into nothing in the passenger seat. The old Hannah would have stayed. Would have shrunk lower, knuckles white against the door handle, praying for invisibility. Would have told herself it was nothing. Just friends. She's being paranoid. He loves her. He proposed. He's coming back. The old Hannah was a fool. I knew that now. I'd lived through it once. The years of quiet humiliation, the slow erosion of my spine, the night I finally left town with nothing but a dead phone and $42. I'd built a whole new life from that rubble. I'd learned to hate the woman I used to be. And then I woke up in this car. The panic hit first, cold, electric scrambling through my chest. This isn't real. I was in Millbrook. I had an apartment. I had a job I didn't hate. I looked down at my hands. Younger. Softer. No calluses from the woodworking shop. And on my left ring finger, the thin gold band with its tiny, pathetic diamond, the ring he gave me when he thought I was enough, the ring I wore while he looked at Chloe like she was the sunrise. The rage came second. It wasn't the slow burn of a woman betrayed. It was an inferno, white-hot and clean, and it burned away every thought except one. I was not going to wait. I was not going to sit here and let myself be a ghost in my own life. I slid over to the driver's seat. My hands were steady. I turned the key, and the engine roared back to life. The diner windows reflected a woman I barely recognized, face pale, jaw tight, eyes blazing. I didn't look for him. I didn't want to watch the moment his expression shifted from adoration to confusion. I just put the car in drive and pulled out of the parking lot. Oak Haven blurred past me. The library where I worked. The coffee shop where he'd first asked me out. The park where he'd knelt in the snow and promised me forever. All of it. The landmarks of a life I was supposed to want, streaked past in gray and beige smears. I drove with a focus I didn't know I had. The highway ramp appeared. I didn't hesitate. The tires hit asphalt, and I floored it. I had $42 in my wallet. A credit card that would be canceled within hours. A phone that was already buzzing with messages I refused to read. And a head full of memories that didn't belong to this version of me, but I had my hands on the wheel. I had a full tank of gas. And I had the clean, sharp certainty that I was never going back. That I drove for 6 hours straight. The sun set somewhere behind me. The radio stations faded from pop to country to static, and still I drove. My eyes burned. My hands cramped. But every mile I put between me and Oak Haven felt like a breath I'd been holding for years. I ended up in a town called Millbrook. The kind of place that doesn't show up on maps unless you're looking for it. Population, maybe 3,000. Main Street was 4 blocks of boarded-up storefronts and one diner that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 70s. My gas gauge hovered on empty. My phone had lost service 30 miles ago. I pulled into a motel with a flickering neon sign that read vacancy with the C burned out. The lobby smelled like bleach and old cigarettes. The man at the desk didn't look up from his newspaper. 40 a night. Checkouts 11. I counted out $40 from my wallet. He slid a key across the counter. A real key, attached to a plastic diamond. Room 14. The carpet was brown and patterned like someone had vomited flowers. The bedspread was scratchy and smelled faintly of mildew. The TV got 3 channels, all static. The bathroom tile had a distinct brown tinge that I chose not to examine too closely. It was perfect. It was anonymous. It was mine. I locked the door, slid the chain across, sat down on the edge of the bed, and stared at the wall for a long time. Then I started shaking. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't the graceful tears of a woman finding her strength. It was ugly. It was the heaving, gasping sobs of someone who had just run away from her entire life with nothing but a stolen car and a head full of someone else's memories. I cried until I couldn't breathe, until my ribs ached, until I collapsed sideways onto the mildewed bedspread and fell asleep with my shoes still on. I woke to sunlight and the sound of a truck rumbling through the parking lot. For one blissful second, I didn't know where I was. Then the smell hit me. Stale smoke, cheap cleaner, the ghost of 1,000 strangers, and it all came crashing back. I sat up slowly. My neck was stiff. My eyes felt like they'd been sanded. I pulled out my phone, just to check the time, and the screen lit up with notifications. 47 missed calls. All from Ethan. 23 voicemails. All from Ethan. Text messages. Too many to count, ranging from "where are you" to "this isn't funny" to "Hannah, please come home" to "you're making a huge mistake." I deleted them all without reading a single one. Then I opened the hotel curtains. Millbrook looked even sadder in daylight. Dusty streets. A few tired-looking cars. A dog sleeping on the sidewalk. The Rusty Spoon diner I'd spotted last night was 2 doors down, and even from here, I could see the stack of pancakes through the window. I had $2 left. A stolen car. And no plan. That was okay. I'd had no plan the first time either. And I'd survived. I showered. The water pressure was a joke, and the hot water ran out in 3 minutes, but I scrubbed the salt from my face and the road from my skin. I pulled my hair back into a messy ponytail. I looked in the mirror at the woman staring back at me. She looked exhausted. She looked scared. She looked like she hadn't slept in a week. But her eyes were clear. And for the first time in years, she looked like she might actually fight back. I walked to the diner. A bell jingled above the door. The place was maybe half full, a few truckers hunched over coffee, a family in a corner booth, an old man reading a newspaper that was 2 days old. A waitress with weary eyes and a name tag that said Brenda looked up from the counter. "Grab a seat, hon, coffee's fresh." I slid into a booth by the window. The vinyl was cracked and patched with duct tape. The menu was laminated and sticky. I ordered the cheapest thing on it, a short stack of pancakes and a coffee, and tried not to think about the fact that I was using my last $2. Brenda brought the coffee first. I wrapped my hands around the mug and let the warmth seep into my fingers. "You okay, hon?" she asked. "You look like you've been through something." I opened my mouth to say I was fine. The lie was right there on my tongue. Instead, I said, "I ran away from my fiancé." Brenda didn't blink. She pulled out the chair across from me and sat down. "He hit you?" "No. Nothing like that. He made me small." She nodded like she understood. "My first husband did that. Made me feel like I was taking up too much space just by existing. Took me 10 years to leave." "I'm not going back," I said. It came out stronger than I expected. "Good," she said. She pulled a pen from behind her ear and scribbled something on a napkin. "This is my number. I own the motel next door. I need someone to clean rooms, change sheets, that kind of thing. Room and board plus $50 a week. It's not much, but it's something." I stared at the napkin like it was made of gold. "You don't even know me," I said. "I know a runner when I see one," Brenda said. "And runners need a soft place to land." "You want the job," I nodded. My throat was too tight to speak. "Good." She stood up and tucked the pen back behind her ear. "Eat your pancakes. You start tomorrow." "And hon," she paused, her hand on the edge of the table. "You did the right thing. Walking away from someone who makes you small, that's not running. That's survival." She walked back to the counter before I could respond. I looked down at my pancakes and discovered I was crying again. But this time, the tears felt different. Lighter. Like something had finally been released. I ate every bite. Then I walked back to the motel, collected the stolen car, and drove it to a used car lot 3 miles out of town. The owner, a man named Greg with a beer belly and a suspicious squint, gave me $3,000 cash for it. No questions asked. I knew it was Ethan's car. I knew he'd report it stolen. But I also knew there was no way he'd tracked it to Millbrook yet. And by the time he did, I'd be long gone. I wasn't going to hide. I was just going to give myself enough time to build something he couldn't tear down. That night, I moved into the motel room Brenda had set aside for me. It was identical to the one I'd stayed in, scratchy bedspread, dodgy TV, brown-tinged tile. But it came with a tiny kitchenette, a hot plate, and a mini fridge that hummed like a dying animal. that I didn't care. It was mine that I spent the first week cleaning rooms, changing sheets, scrubbing toilets. My back ached. My hands were raw from bleach. But every night, I fell into bed with the quiet satisfaction of having earned my place. I found a beat-up laptop at a thrift store for $30. The screen was cracked and the battery lasted an hour, but it connected to the motel's weak Wi-Fi. I spent my evenings searching for jobs, researching community college programs, learning everything I could about Millbrook. The town was dying. The textile mill had closed 5 years ago. Half the storefronts on Main Street were empty, but there was something about it that felt alive. Maybe it was the old men who gathered at the diner every morning to argue about politics. Maybe it was the stray cat that had adopted the motel and slept on the office steps. Maybe it was the way the sun set over the plains, all gold and purple and endless. I started to feel like I could breathe here. Then, on my 10th day, I saw Ethan's face. It was on a flyer taped to the diner's front window. "Have you seen this woman?" it read, above a photo of me from his office Christmas party. My smile was frozen and fake. I looked smaller in the picture than I felt now. Brenda caught me staring. She walked over and ripped the flyer down with one swift motion. "Some guy came through this morning," she said. "Asked about you. Said he was your fiancé. Looked desperate, but something about him rubbed me wrong." "What did you tell him?" "I told him I'd never seen you in my life." Brenda crumpled the flyer and tossed it in the trash. "Which is true. I've never seen that woman in the picture. The woman I know has a straight spine and a bad attitude, and she's gonna do just fine." I laughed. It was the first real laugh I'd had in weeks. "Thank you," I said. "Don't thank me yet. You're still on room cleaning duty. That toilet in 12 needs a scrub." I scrubbed the toilet, and the sink, and the shower. And I thought about Ethan, driving through Millbrook with his flyers and his desperate questions. I thought about how he'd probably never expected me to leave. How he'd probably assumed I'd wait forever like I always did, and I was done waiting. 2 days later, I got a job at the Rusty Spoon. Brenda needed help on the breakfast shift, and I needed money. The hours were brutal. I was up at 4 in the morning, flipping pancakes and pouring coffee until noon, but I didn't mind. The diner was chaos, and chaos was a great distraction. The truckers were my favorites. They didn't ask questions. They just wanted their eggs over easy and their coffee black. They called me honey and sweetheart in a way that felt grandfatherly, not creepy. They left good tips and even better stories. That one of them, a guy named Mark with a handlebar mustache and a laugh that shook the windows, gave me a ride to the community college on his way out of town. I enrolled in a business administration program that started in 2 weeks. "This is what I'm going to do," I told Brenda that night. "I'm going to get a degree. I'm going to get a real job. I'm going to build a life that I actually want to live." Brenda raised her coffee mug in a toast. "To building things," she said. To building things," I echoed. For the next 3 weeks, I fell into a rhythm. Wake up, work, study, sleep, repeat. I didn't think about Ethan. I didn't think about Oakhaven. I didn't think about Chloe, or the diner, or the way he'd looked at her like she was the only person in the world. I just kept moving, but then the phone started ringing. The motel had a landline in the office, and Brenda let me use it when I needed to. I'd given the number to a few people: my landlord's office, the community college, a job recruiter. So when it rang on a Friday night, I answered without thinking. "Hannah," the voice hit me like a physical blow. It was Ethan. He'd found the number somehow. He tracked me down. "How did you get this number?" I demanded. "I called your friends, your family, everyone. No one knew where you went, but I found a credit card charge from Millbrook, a motel. So I looked up the number." "Please just listen." "No. Hannah, please. I've been going out of my mind. I didn't know what happened to you. I thought something terrible had. You thought something terrible had happened." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Ethan, you left me in the car for an hour. To flirt with your work crush. You didn't even think to check on me." "That's not what happened. I saw you. Through the window. I watched you hold her hand. I watched you look at her the way you never looked at me. And I thought I had a right to be angry, to be hurt. But the thing is, I wasn't hurt. I was relieved. Do you understand that I was relieved? Because you finally gave me a reason to leave." He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "I'm sorry. I know I was an idiot. But you have to understand. I didn't choose her over you. I was confused. Don't, I said. Don't make excuses. You had a choice. You made it. And so did I. Hannah, I love you. No, you don't. You love the idea of me. You love that I was convenient. That I was always there. That I never asked for anything. But you never actually saw me. Not once. I hung up. My hands were shaking. My chest was heaving. But I felt powerful in a way I never felt before. I just told the truth. The whole truth. And I hadn't broken. That night, I dreamed of Oakhaven. The library where I'd worked. The coffee shop where Ethan had first kissed me. The park where he'd proposed. But in the dream, I was walking away from all of it. I was walking toward something else. Something new. Something I couldn't quite see yet. I woke up with the feeling of that dream still buzzing under my skin. I started my business classes a week later. The campus was small, nothing like the sprawling university I'd attended the first time around, but I liked it. The classrooms were intimate. The professors knew my name. I was nobody's fiancé, nobody's ex. I was just a student with a second chance. The first semester flew by. I aced every class. I made friends for the first time since I'd left Oakhaven. Real friends, not the kind that came with Ethan's social circle. A woman named Maria in my accounting class. A guy named Derek in my marketing course. They didn't know my history. They didn't need to. They just liked me for who I was now. I was starting to think I might actually be happy. And then on a crisp November evening, Ethan showed up. I was walking back to the motel after class. The air was cold enough to see my breath. I had my head down against the wind, my backpack heavy with textbooks, when a car pulled up beside me. It was a rental, a silver sedan with dealer plates. The window rolled down, and there he was. He looked terrible. His hair was too long, his eyes were shadowed, and he'd lost weight he didn't have to lose. He looked like a man who'd been running on fumes for months. "Hi," he said. Just that. One word. Like he'd been rehearsing it. "How did you find me?" "Followed you," he admitted. "From the college. I've been waiting for 3 days." He got out of the car. He was wearing a coat that was too thin for the weather, and he was shivering. "Hannah, I need to talk to you. Just for 5 minutes. Then if you never want to see me again, I'll go. I swear." I should have walked away. Every instinct I had told me to walk away. But I was tired. Tired of running. Tired of being afraid. 5 minutes, I said. He nodded, relief flooding his face. "Thank you. Thank you." We walked to a bench near the motel parking lot. It was cold, and the metal was damp, but we sat. He turned to face me, and I could see how much he'd changed. He wasn't the confident, polished man I'd left. He was a wreck. A gorgeous, desperate wreck. "I've been seeing a therapist," he said, "since you left." I know that sounds like a ploy, but it's true. I couldn't figure out what happened. Why you left. Why you ran. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I've been a terrible partner. "I didn't say anything. I took you for granted," he continued. "I assumed you'd always be there, no matter what I did. And when you weren't, when you just vanished, it shattered me. Not because I felt guilty. Because I realized I'd spent 4 years building a life with a woman I didn't actually know." "Ethan, let me finish. Please. I'm not asking you to come back. I'm not even asking you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I finally see it. I see what I did. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He reached out, slowly, like he was approaching a frightened animal. His fingers brushed mine. "I loved you," he said. "I still love you. But I didn't know how to love you right. I didn't know how to show up. And you deserved so much better than what I gave you." I pull my hand away. "You're right. I did. I do. But you can't fix this, Ethan. You can't fix what you broke. I'm not the same person I was." "I know," he said. "That's the hardest part. I can see it in your eyes. You're different. You're harder, colder, but also stronger. I wish I could have been part of that change. I wish I could have helped you become this person. But I know I didn't. You did it on your own." The ache in my chest caught me off guard. I'd been ready for anger. I'd been ready for manipulation, guilt-tripping, begging. I hadn't been ready for this. For him to acknowledge, finally, what he'd done. "Thank you. I said. For saying that. But it doesn't change anything. I know, he said again. I'm not asking it to. I needed you to know. And I needed to say it out loud.
To you.
Because you deserve to hear it. He stood up. He was still shivering, and his hands were jammed in his pockets. I'm going back to Oakhaven, he said. I'm going to get my act together. I'm going to try to be someone you could be proud of, even if you never see me again. Ethan, I'll be okay, he said. You don't need to worry about me. He managed a small, sad smile. You never needed to worry about me. I just made you think you did. He walked back to his rental car. I watched him go. He didn't look back. I sat on the cold bench for a long time after he'd driven away. The moon was up, low and full over the plains. The motel's sign flickered its broken vacancy, glowed, and I felt empty. But also light. Like something I'd been carrying for years had finally been set down. I didn't know if I'd ever see Ethan again. I didn't know if I wanted to. But I knew one thing for certain. The life I was building now, in this dusty little town with its cracked vinyl and its weak coffee and its people who saw me for who I was, it was mine. It had always been mine. I just needed to walk away to claim it. I stood up, walked back to the motel, and went asleep. Tomorrow, I had a shift at the diner. A paper due in my marketing class. A future I was still sketching out, one day at a time, and for the first time, I couldn't wait to wake up and live it. The first week in Millbrook was a masterclass in survival. I woke up every morning at 5, scrubbed toilets until my hands were raw, changed sheets that smelled like 100 different strangers, and fell into bed each night too exhausted to dream. The work was brutal. The pay was barely enough to keep me in coffee and instant noodles. But I didn't care. Every sore muscle was a reminder that I was earning my own way. Every dollar I pocketed was one step further from a woman who used to wait in parked cars. Brenda kept her word. The room was mine, the food was simple, and the $50 a week was more than enough for someone who had nowhere else to go. I spent my first paycheck on a bus pass and a pair of shoes that didn't leave blisters. The second paycheck went to the thrift store laptop, the one with the cracked screen and the dying battery. I became a ghost in Millbrook. Not the sad kind, the kind that haunts hallways and rattles chains. I became the kind of ghost that just disappears into the background. The truckers at the diner knew me as the quiet one who remembers how you take your coffee. Brenda knew me as the woman who showed up early and stayed late. The motel guests knew me as the girl who left fresh towels and never made eye contact. Anonymity was a gift I hadn't known I needed, but on the 10th day, my anonymity cracked. I was wiping down the counter at the Rusty Spoon when I saw it. A flyer taped to the front window, right next to the daily specials board. My own face stared back at me. The photo was from Ethan's office Christmas party, the one where I'd worn a red dress and smiled so hard my jaw ached. In the picture, I looked smaller than I felt now. Softer. Like someone who could be pushed around. Have you seen this woman? The flyer screamed in bold black letters. Below it, a phone number I knew by heart. The world tilted. My grip on the rag tightened until my knuckles went white. I felt like I was back in that car, watching Ethan feed French fries to Chloe, the taste of betrayal cold and metallic in my mouth. Brenda appeared beside me. She followed my gaze, saw the flyer, and ripped it off the window in one swift motion. Some guy came through this morning, she said, crumpling the paper in her fist. Said he was your fiancé. Looked desperate, but something about him rubbed me wrong. Too smooth. Too practiced. What did you tell him? I told him I'd never seen you in my life. She tossed the flyer in the trash behind the counter. Which is true. I've never seen that woman in the picture. The woman I know has a straight spine and a bad attitude, and she's gonna do just fine. I opened my mouth to say something. Thank you, maybe, or I'm sorry, but the words got stuck in my throat. Instead, I just nodded. Don't thank me yet, Brenda said. That toilet in room 12 still needs a scrub. I scrubbed the toilet. I scrubbed the sink. I scrubbed the shower until the brown tinge on the tile started to fade. And while I scrubbed, I thought about Ethan. I thought about him driving through Millbrook, taping flyers to windows, asking strangers if they'd seen me. I thought about how he probably expected me to come running back the moment I saw his face on that paper. He probably thought I'd be flattered by the attention. He probably thought I'd realize my mistake and crawl back to Oakhaven with my tail between my legs. He didn't know me at all. Not the new me. Not the me who had sat in that car and watched him choose someone else and felt nothing but relief. A knock on the bathroom door snapped me out of my thoughts. Hannah, it was Brenda. She opened the door a crack and poked her head in. I got something for you. She handed me an envelope. Inside was $100 in cash and a slip of paper with an address. What's this? I asked. There's a community college 40 minutes from here. My sister works in the admissions office. She says they're still accepting applications for the spring semester. I figured you might want to do something with yourself. Something more than cleaning motel rooms. I stared at the envelope. Brenda, I can't afford. It's not a loan. It's a gift. You can pay me back by not wasting it. Go take a class. Learn something. Become someone who doesn't have to scrub toilets for a living. My hands were shaking. Why are you doing this for me? You barely know me. I know a runner when I see one, Brenda said. And I know what happens to runners who don't find something to hold on to. They keep running until they fall apart. I don't want that for you. I didn't know what to say. So, I didn't say anything. I just hugged her. It was awkward and unexpected, and she stiffened for a moment before patting me on the back like I was a stray cat who'd wandered into her kitchen. That night, I looked up the community college online. The website was old and clunky, but the course catalog was impressive. Business administration, marketing, accounting. I'd spent years in Oakhaven working at a library, shelving books and checking out patrons, never imagining I could do anything else. But here, in this dusty little town with its cracked sidewalks and dying main street, I could be anyone. I enrolled in a business administration program that started in 2 weeks. The application fee ate most of Brenda's gift, but I didn't care. For the first time in months, I had something to look forward to. The next 2 weeks were a blur of routine and preparation. I worked double shifts at the diner to save up for textbooks. I cleaned motel rooms faster and better, earning approving nods from Brenda. I memorized the bus schedule and walked the route to the community college twice, just to make sure I could find my way to, and I stopped answering the phone. The motel's landline rang constantly. At first, it was Ethan's voice on the other end, pleading, demanding, alternating between apologies and accusations. Then it was his mother, her voice syrupy and fake, asking if I was okay and reminding me that Ethan's just going through a hard time. Then it was his sister, who never liked me anyway, leaving messages that were barely veiled threats. I let them all go to voicemail. I didn't delete them. I just let them pile up, a digital monument to a life I'd left behind. The worst was the message from Chloe. I'd never spoken to her directly. Not in Oakhaven, not anywhere. But she found the motel's number somehow, and she left a message that was so sweet it made my teeth hurt. Hannah, it's Chloe. I just wanted to say I'm so sorry for everything. Ethan and I were never anything, I promise. He's been so upset since you left, and I feel just terrible. Please call me. We can talk. I can help you understand. I deleted the message before she could finish. I didn't need her help understanding anything. I understood perfectly. I understood that she'd played her part in breaking my life apart, and I understood that she wasn't sorry. She was just afraid. Afraid that if Ethan couldn't win me back, he'd blame her. Afraid that he'd realize what he'd lost and take it out on her. She should be afraid. But that wasn't my problem anymore. The first day of classes came faster than I expected. I woke up at 4, worked my breakfast shift at the diner, then caught the bus to the community college. The campus was small and unassuming, a few brick buildings clustered around a central quad, a library that looked like it had been built in the 70s, and a cafeteria that served coffee so bad it made the Rusty Spoon's brew taste gourmet. My first class was Introduction to Business. The professor was a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and a voice that could cut glass. She didn't care about excuses. She didn't care about my history or my sob story. She just wanted to teach, and she expected me to learn. I loved her immediately. I sat in the back row and took notes furiously. I'd forgotten what it felt like to learn something new, to stretch my brain in ways it hadn't been stretched before. The other students in the class were mostly younger than me, kids fresh out of high school, still figuring out who they wanted to be. They didn't look at me sideways. They didn't ask where I'd come from. They just saw a woman with a notebook and a cheap pen, and they didn't care about anything else. It was liberating that I started making friends without meaning to. Maria, the woman in my accounting class, was a single mother with a 4-year-old daughter and a laugh that filled up the whole room. Derek, from my marketing course, was a former construction worker who decided to go back to school after a back injury. They didn't know about Ethan. They didn't know about Oakhaven. They just knew me as Hannah, the quiet one who always showed up on time and never complained. You ever think about what you want to do after this? Maria asked one afternoon. We were sitting in the cafeteria, nursing cups of the terrible coffee, watching the fall leaves drift across the quad. I don't know. I admitted. I haven't thought that far ahead. That's your problem, Derek said. He leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed. You gotta have a plan, a goal, something to work toward. Otherwise, you're just drifting. Drifting's not always bad, I said. Sometimes drifting is how you find your way. Maria laughed. That's deep for someone who just learned the difference between a debit and a credit. I laughed too. It felt good. Laughing with people who didn't know my past, who didn't see me as the woman who'd been left behind. For a moment, I felt almost normal, but the past had a way of catching up. It was a Friday night, 3 weeks into the semester. I was walking back to the motel after a late study session at the library. The air was cold and sharp, and the streetlights cast long shadows across the sidewalk. I had my head down, my backpack heavy with textbooks, when I heard the sound of footsteps behind me. I picked up my pace. The footsteps matched it. I started walking faster. So did the person behind me. I was about to break into a run when a hand grabbed my shoulder. I spun around, ready to fight, my bag raised like a weapon. It was Ethan. He looked terrible. His hair was too long, his jaw was covered in stubble, and he'd lost weight he didn't have to lose. His eyes were bloodshot, and his hands were shaking. Hannah, he said. His voice cracked. Please. Just let me talk to you. I stepped back, my heart pounding. How did you find me? I followed you. From the college. I've been waiting for 3 days. He laughed. A bitter, broken sound. I didn't know where else to go. You wouldn't answer my calls. You wouldn't respond to my messages. I had to see you. I had to. Ethan, stop. I held up my hands. You need to leave. You can't be here. I'm not leaving until you hear me out. He stepped closer, and I could smell the stale coffee on his breath, the cheap liquor on his coat. Just 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. I should have walked away. Every instinct I had told me to walk away. But I was tired. Tired of running. Tired of being afraid. And some part of me, the stupid part, the part that still remembered how he used to make me laugh, wanted to hear what he had to say. 5 minutes, I said. He nodded, relief flooding his face. Thank you. Thank you. We walked to a bench near the motel parking lot. It was cold, and the metal was damp with frost, but we sat. He turned to face me, and I could see how much he'd changed. He wasn't the confident, polished man I'd left. He was a wreck. A gorgeous, desperate wreck. I've been seeing a therapist, he said. Since you left. I know that sounds like a ploy, but it's true. I couldn't figure out what happened. Why you left. Why you ran. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I've been a terrible partner. I didn't say anything. I took you for granted, he continued. I assumed you'd always be there, no matter what I did. And when you weren't, when you just vanished, it shattered me. Not because I felt guilty. Because I realized I'd spent 4 years building a life with a woman I didn't actually know. Ethan, let me finish. Please. I'm not asking you to come back. I'm not even asking you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I finally see it. I see what I did. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. He reached out, slowly, like he was approaching a frightened animal. His fingers brushed mine. I loved you, he said. I still love you. But I didn't know how to love you right. I didn't know how to show up. And you deserved so much better than what I gave you. I pulled my hand away. You're right. I did. I do. But you can't fix this, Ethan. You can't fix what you broke. I'm not the same person I was. I know, he said. That's the hardest part. I can see it in your eyes. You're different. You're harder. Colder. but also stronger. I wish I could have been part of that change. I wish I could have helped you become this person. But I know I didn't. You did it on your own. The ache in my chest caught me off guard. I'd been ready for anger. I'd been ready for manipulation, guilt-tripping, begging. I hadn't been ready for this. For him to acknowledge, finally, what he'd done. Thank you, I said, for saying that. But it doesn't change anything. I know, he said again. I'm not asking it to. I needed you to know. And I needed to say it out loud. To you. Because you deserve to hear it. He stood up. He was still shivering, and his hands were jammed in his pockets. I'm going back to Oakhaven, he said. I'm going to get my act together. I'm going to try to be someone you could be proud of, even if you never see me again. Ethan, I'll be okay, he said. You don't need to worry about me. He managed a small, sad smile. You never needed to worry about me. I just made you think you did. He walked back to his rental car. I watched him go. He didn't look back. I sat on the cold bench for a long time after he'd driven away. The moon was up, low and full over the plains. The motel sign flickered its broken vacancy glow. I felt empty, but also light. Like something I'd been carrying for years had finally been set down. I didn't know if I'd ever see him again. I didn't know if I wanted to. But I knew one thing for certain. The life I was building now, in this dusty little town with its cracked vinyl and its weak coffee and its people who saw me for who I was, it was mine. It had always been mine. I just needed to walk away to claim it. The next morning, I told Brenda about Ethan's visit. She listened without interrupting, her face unreadable. When I finished, she poured me a cup of coffee and slid it across the counter. You handled that well, she said. Better than I would have, probably. I didn't handle it well. I just sat there and let him talk. Sitting there and letting someone talk takes more strength than screaming at them. She leaned on the counter, her eyes sharp and appraising. You gave him closure. You didn't have to, but you did it anyway. That's not weakness. That's grace. I didn't feel graceful. I felt raw, like a layer of skin had been peeled away. But I also felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The weeks rolled on. Fall turned into winter, and winter in Millbrook was brutal. The wind howled off the plains, and the snow piled up in dirty heaps along the streets. But I didn't mind. The cold was a balm, a constant reminder of the warmth I was building inside. Did I ace my classes? I made more friends. I stopped thinking about Ethan every waking moment. He still called sometimes. I could see the missed calls piling up on the motel's landline, but I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I'd already said everything I needed to say. Brenda promoted me to assistant manager at the Rusty Spoon. It wasn't a glamorous job. I was still flipping pancakes and pouring coffee, but it came with a small raise and a sense of purpose. The other waitresses started coming to me with their problems, their questions, their small-town dramas. I didn't have answers for all of them, but I listened. And sometimes that was enough. I started woodworking. It was a hobby I'd picked up in the other life, the one that hadn't happened yet. A small workshop near the motel rented out space by the hour, and I spent my weekends there, learning to shape wood into furniture. A table, a chair, a bookshelf. The physicality of it, the focus required, was a kind of meditation. My hands, which had once been soft and useless, grew calloused and strong. I was building things, literally and figuratively, and then, on a warm spring evening, everything changed. I was at the lumberyard, picking out a piece of maple, when I heard a voice behind me. Hannah, I turned. It was a woman about my age. She had a kind face and a warm smile. I felt a flicker of recognition, but I couldn't place her. I'm sorry, I said. Do I know you? Probably not, she laughed. My name is Jane. I used to work with Ethan. I saw you a few times at the office. My stomach tightened. A connection to Ethan. An unexpected landmine. Oh, I said, my voice guarded. That's a coincidence. I heard what happened, she said, her voice quiet, her eyes sympathetic. I'm sorry. He was an idiot. I managed a small smile. He was. But it all worked out for the best. I'm so glad to hear you say that, she said, her eyes brightening. I just wanted to tell you something. I know it's not my place, but I felt you deserved to know. When he and Chloe got together, it was a total disaster from the start. She was so high maintenance, always trying to change him. They were engaged, but she broke it off a few months later. She met someone else. A new guy at the gym. She left him for him. I blinked. That wasn't what had happened in my other life. In my other life, they had gotten married. They'd seemed happy. Had my leaving changed things that profoundly? Anyway, Jane continued. Ethan was a mess. But he's finally starting to get his act together.
He moved away, actually, to Boston. Got a new job.
He seems different. Quieter. I was reeling. This was a variable I hadn't accounted for. The future I'd known was a vision from a timeline that no longer existed. My actions had created a new future, one that was unfolding in ways I never could have predicted. Thank you for telling me, Jane, I said, my voice steady. I appreciate it, but it doesn't change anything. My life is here now. It's good, and I don't want to go backward. Jane smiled. I know. I just wanted you to know. You deserved that closure. We parted ways, and I stood in the lumberyard for a long time, a piece of maple in my hands, staring at nothing. The past was no longer a fixed point. It was a fluid thing, a cloud of possibility. I was no longer a prisoner of my memories. When I got back to the motel, Brenda was waiting for me. She had a strange expression on her face, half worried, half pleased. Someone came looking for you, she said. A woman. Said she was your sister. I froze. I didn't have a sister. Not in this life. Not in any life. What did she look like? Blonde.
Pretty.
Too much makeup. She was driving a fancy car, the kind that costs more than this motel is worth. Chloe'd up my blood, ran cold. What did you tell her? I told her you weren't here. Which was true. You weren't. But she didn't believe me. She left a note. Brenda handed me a folded piece of paper. My hands were shaking as I opened it. Hannah, I know you don't want to talk to me, but I need to explain. I know what you think happened between me and Ethan, but it wasn't like that. I was in a bad place, and he was kind to me. That's all it was. I never meant to hurt you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please call me. I can explain everything. Chloe, I crumpled the note and threw it in the trash. She's not my sister, I said. Brenda raised an eyebrow. I figured. She's the woman my fiancé was with. The one he left me in the car for.
Ah.
Brenda nodded slowly. So, what are you going to do? I thought about it. I thought about calling Chloe, listening to her excuses, letting her explain herself. I thought about screaming at her, telling her exactly what I thought of her and her apologies and her perfect blonde hair. Then I thought about the life I'd built here. The classes I was acing. The friends I'd made. The furniture I was building with my own two hands. The peace I'd found. Nothing, I said. I'm going to do nothing. She's not worth my time. Brenda smiled. That's my girl. That night, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. I could still hear Jane's words echoing in my head. They were engaged, but she broke it off. She left him. In my other life, Ethan and Chloe had been together. They'd been happy. But in this life, everything was different. Because I was different, I'd spent so long being afraid of the future, trying to outrun it. But the future wasn't something to be afraid of. It was something to create. I had the power to shape it. I had the power to build something new, and I was going to use it. A year had passed since I'd left Ethan in that diner parking lot. A full year of early mornings, late nights, calloused hands, and a slowly filling bank account. I still worked at the Rusty Spoon, but Brenda had promoted me to full assistant manager, and the pay was enough to cover my classes and a small apartment above a closed-down bakery. The apartment smelled like stale sugar and was freezing in the winter, but it was mine. I enrolled in a second semester of classes, and then a third. Business law, marketing strategy, financial accounting. The words came easily now, the concepts clicking into place like puzzle pieces. I'd spent the first 25 years of my life feeling like I was drowning in other people's expectations. Now I was learning to swim. The woodworking continued. I built a bookshelf for my tiny apartment, a coffee table for Brenda's living room, and a rocking chair for Maria's daughter. The shop owner, an old man named Hal who'd been a carpenter for 40 years, started letting me use his tools for free. "You got a gift, kid," he said one afternoon, watching me sand a tabletop. "Don't waste it." I didn't plan to waste anything in the spring. I applied for a transfer to a 4-year university. The application was a stack of papers and a personal statement that took me 3 weeks to write. I wrote about starting over. I wrote about the moment I'd sat in a parked car and realized I was invisible. I wrote about the diner and the motel and the woman who'd given me a chance when I had nothing. I didn't mention Ethan. I didn't mention Oakhaven. I didn't mention the other life I'd lived, the one where I'd watched him marry someone else and smiled through the pain. That wasn't part of this story. This story was mine. The acceptance letter came in June. I opened it in the rusty spoon, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. Brenda was behind the counter, polishing a coffee mug with the intensity of someone who'd seen too many heartbreaks in this town. "Well," she said, "don't keep me in suspense." I held up the letter. "I got in." She dropped the mug. It shattered on the floor, but she didn't even look at it. She came around the counter and hugged me so hard I thought my ribs might crack. "I knew it," she said. "I knew you'd do it." The regulars clapped. Mark the trucker bought me a piece of pie. The old man who read 2-day-old newspapers shook my hand like I'd just won an election. For a moment, I felt like I belonged to something bigger than myself. But the celebration didn't last. A week later, I came back from class to find a note taped to my apartment door. It was written on hotel stationery, the kind you find in places that cost more per night than I made in a month. The handwriting was loopy and perfect, the letters slanted with practiced elegance. "Hannah, I'm in town. I need to talk to you. Please. I'll be at the Millbrook Inn until Friday." Chloe, my blood ran cold. The Millbrook Inn was the only nice hotel in town. It sat on the edge of Main Street, a 3-story brick building with a lobby that smelled like lavender and fresh flowers. I'd never been inside. I couldn't afford it, but Chloe could. Chloe could afford anything. I crumpled the note and threw it in the trash. I didn't want to see her. I didn't want to hear her excuses. I'd spent a year building a life free of her and Ethan and all the toxic history they carried. I wasn't going to let her waltz back in and destroy it. But Chloe was persistent. The next morning, I walked into the Rusty Spoon for my shift, and there she was. She was sitting at the counter, a cup of coffee in front of her that she hadn't touched. She was wearing a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and her hair was perfect, her makeup flawless. She looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. She looked like she didn't belong here. The diner had gone quiet. Everyone was staring. "Hannah," Chloe said, her voice soft and sweet. "I'm so glad you're here." I didn't respond. I walked behind the counter, tied on my apron, and started filling the sugar dispensers. My hands were steady, even though my heart was pounding. "Hannah, please. Just hear me out. I've been trying to reach you for weeks. I came all the way from Oakhaven. The least you can do is listen." I turned to face her. "The least I can do is nothing. I don't owe you anything, Chloe. Not my time. Not my attention. Not a single word." "I know you don't," she said, her eyes wide and pleading. "But I came here because I wanted to apologize. In person. I wanted to explain what happened." "Nothing happened," I said flatly. "That's the whole point. You and Ethan, nothing happened. Except he made me feel like nothing. And you let him." Her face crumpled. For a moment I thought she might actually cry. But then she straightened, and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't expected. Anger. "You don't know the whole story," she said. "You think you do, but you don't. Ethan and I don't care." I slammed the sugar dispenser down on the counter. The noise echoed through the diner. "I don't care what happened between you and Ethan. I don't care if he loved you. I don't care if he still loves you. That part of my life is over. I've moved on. And you need to, too." Chloe stared at me. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She slid it across the counter. "Read this," she said. "Please. Then, if you still want me to leave, I'll go." I looked down at the paper. It was a letter, written in Ethan's handwriting. I knew that handwriting better than my own. The way he dotted his I's with tiny circles, the way his T's crossed at a sharp angle. I don't need to read this, I said. Just read it, Chloe said. For yourself. You'll understand. She stood up, left a $20 bill on the counter, and walked out of the diner. The bell jingled above the door, and she was gone. I stared at the letter for a long time. The other customers had gone back to their breakfasts. Brenda was watching me from the kitchen door, her expression unreadable. You don't have to read it, she said. You can burn it. You can throw it in the trash. You can do whatever you want. I know, I said. That's the problem. I don't know what I want. I tucked the letter into my apron pocket and finished my shift. The hours crawled by, the orders blurring into a haze of eggs and coffee and small talk I couldn't focus on. My hand kept drifting to my pocket, to the folded paper that seemed to burn through the fabric. When my shift ended, I went back to my apartment. I locked the door. I sat down on the edge of my bed, and I opened the letter. Hannah, I don't know if you'll ever read this. Part of me hopes you won't, because reading it means you're still thinking about me, and you deserve better than that. But another part of me, the selfish part, needs you to know the truth that I was never in love with Chloe. I know you don't believe me. I wouldn't believe me either if I were you, but it's the truth. She was a distraction. A way to feel something when I'd convinced myself I couldn't feel anything anymore. I used her. Not intentionally. Not with malice. But I used her all the same. The night you left, the night at the diner, I was planning to break up with you. I know that sounds insane, considering you were the one who drove away. But I had it all planned out. I was going to come back to the car, take you home, and tell you I needed some space. I was going to tell you I didn't know if I was ready for marriage. I was going to make it about me, like I always did, but then you left. And suddenly, everything shifted. I spent weeks trying to find you. Not because I was worried. Not because I wanted you back. I was angry. I was furious. How dare you leave me? How dare you take my car, and my pride, and my carefully constructed life, and just drive away? It took me months to understand what that anger really was. It wasn't anger at you. It was anger at myself. Because in your leaving, you showed me everything I'd been too afraid to see. I was a coward. I was selfish. I was so busy trying to protect myself that I didn't notice I was destroying you. I've been in therapy for almost a year now. It hasn't fixed me. I'm still a mess. But I'm starting to understand why I did the things I did. I was terrified of being vulnerable. Terrified of being known. So I kept you at arm's length, and I told myself it was because I was being careful. But really, I was being cruel. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to come back. I don't expect anything from you. But I wanted you to know that I'm working on myself. I'm trying to be the kind of man you deserved. Maybe it's too late. Maybe it was always too late. But I'm trying. I hope you're happy, wherever you are. I hope you found what you were looking for. And I hope one day you'll think of me and feel nothing at all. That would be the greatest gift you could give me. Ethan, I read the letter 3 times. The first time I was angry. The second time I was sad. The third time, I was just tired. I set the letter down on my nightstand and stared at the ceiling. I didn't cry. I didn't laugh. I just lay there, feeling the weight of everything that had happened settle over me like a blanket I couldn't shake off. I thought about the other life, the one I'd lived before. In that life, Ethan had married Chloe. They'd had a big wedding with white flowers and a string quartet. I'd watched from a distance, the invisible woman, the one who'd been left behind. I'd told myself I was over him. I'd told myself I was happy for them. But I wasn't. I'd just learned to live with the ache. In this life, everything was different. He hadn't married her. He'd fallen apart. He was trying to rebuild himself. And I was trying to rebuild myself. For a long time, I'd seen Ethan as the villain of my story. The man who'd broken me. The man who'd made me feel small. But the letter made me see something I hadn't wanted to see. We were both broken. We just dealt with it differently. I picked up the letter and read it one more time. Then I folded it carefully and put it in my nightstand drawer. I didn't know if I'd keep it. I didn't know if I'd throw it away. But I knew I wasn't going to make a decision tonight. The next morning, I went to work as usual. I poured coffee, flipped pancakes, smiled at the truckers. I told Brenda about the letter. She listened without interrupting, her face unreadable. What do you want to do? She asked when I finished. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to call him.
Part of me wants to never think about him again.
I can't decide.
Then don't decide, she said.
You don't have to figure everything out right now. You've got time. I took her advice. I didn't call Ethan. I didn't call Chloe. I just kept living my life. I went to class. I did my homework. I worked my shifts at the diner. I built furniture in Hal's workshop. I spent weekends with Maria and Derek, drinking terrible coffee and laughing about nothing in particular. A week after Chloe's visit, I found a package on my doorstep. It was a small box, wrapped in brown paper. No return address. I opened it carefully, and inside was a wooden carving. A tiny bird, its wings spread wide. Mid-flight, it was beautiful. The grain of the wood flowed like feathers. The craftsmanship was exquisite. There was no note.
No explanation.
Just the bird that I didn't know who'd sent it. Hal said it wasn't him. Brenda shook her head. Maria had no idea, but I had a feeling. A strange, quiet certainty that I couldn't explain. I kept the bird on my nightstand. Every morning, I woke up and looked at it. Every night, I fell asleep with it watching over me that I didn't know who sent it. But it reminded me of something important. Something I'd almost forgotten, that I was flying. I was finally flying. The bird stayed on my nightstand for weeks. I didn't know who sent it, and I stopped trying to guess. Some gifts were better left mysterious. Summer arrived in Millbrook like a slow wave of heat. The diner's air conditioner broke twice, and Brenda threatened to quit her own establishment at least 3 times. I worked double shifts to cover for the waitresses who couldn't handle the heat, and I studied for my final exams in the coolest corner of the library, the one near the window that always stuck open. I passed everything. Not just passed, aced. My GPA was high enough that the university I'd transferred to offered me a scholarship. It wasn't much, but it was enough to cover my tuition and leave me a little breathing room that I called my mother that night. It was the first time I'd spoken to her since I'd left Oakhaven. She'd left messages on the motel's voicemail, all of them strained and careful, like she was walking on eggshells. I'd ignored them. I wasn't ready, but I was ready now to— "Mom," I said when she answered. "It's me." There was a long pause. Then her voice cracked. "Hannah, is it really you? It's me. I've been so worried. Why didn't you call? Why didn't you tell me where you were? I needed to figure things out on my own," I said.
I'm sorry.
I should have called sooner. Your father's been beside himself. He's been looking for you for months. And Ethan, he came by the house so many times. He was a wreck, Hannah. A complete wreck. I know, Mom. I know. Are you okay? Are you eating? Are you— "I'm fine," I said. And for the first time, I meant it. "I'm really, really fine." She started crying. I let her. I sat on the edge of my bed, the tiny wooden bird on the nightstand watching me, and I listened to my mother cry with relief. It was strange. I'd spent so long being angry at her for never standing up for me, for always taking Ethan's side, for making me feel like I was the problem. But now, hearing her cry, I realized she was just as trapped as I'd been. She'd spent her whole life trying to keep the peace, and she'd lost herself in the process. "I'm coming to visit," she said. "Don't tell me no. I'm coming.
I need to see you."
"Okay," I said. "You can come." She arrived a week later. I picked her up at the bus station in the beat-up sedan I'd bought for $500 from Mark the trucker. She looked older than I remembered, her hair grayer, her face more lined. But her eyes were the same, warm and worried and full of love I hadn't known how to accept. The apartment was too small for 2 people, but we made it work. She slept on my pull-out couch, and I made her coffee in the mornings, the same week, bitter brew I'd learned to love at the Rusty Spoon. She didn't complain. She just watched me with those worried eyes and asked questions I didn't always have answers to. "How did you end up here?" she asked one night. We were sitting on the fire escape, watching the sun set over the plains. The sky was streaked with orange and pink, the kind of sunset you only got in places where the horizon stretched forever. "I drove until I ran out of gas," I said. "And then I stopped." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Your father wants you to come home." I shook my head. This is my home now. He's not the same man he was, Hannah. Losing you, it changed him. He barely talks anymore. He just sits in his chair and stares at the wall. He's not angry. He's just empty. I thought about Ethan's letter, about how he'd said the same thing, that losing me had changed him. I wondered if that was true, or if it was just something people told themselves to feel better. "Mom," I said carefully, "do you think Dad ever really saw me, like actually saw me, or did he just see the daughter he wanted me to be?" She didn't answer. She just reached over and took my hand. The visit ended too soon, and not soon enough. My mother went back to Oakhaven with a promise to call more often, and a new understanding of who I was. I watched her bus pull away from the station and felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness, exactly. More like acceptance. She was who she was. I couldn't change her. I could only change how I responded to her. The summer rolled on. I got a new job at a local office supply store, something to pad my resume and give me a break from the diner. The work was boring, but it was air-conditioned, and it came with a small discount on everything I needed for school. Brenda pretended to be offended that I was leaving her, but I knew she was proud. She'd seen too many women get stuck in Millbrook, too many dreams die in the dust of Main Street. She didn't want that for me. "Don't forget us when you're rich and famous," she said on my last day at the Rusty Spoon. "I'll never forget you," I said. "You're the one who saved me." "Didn't save you," she said, waving a hand. "Just pointed you in the right direction. You did the rest." I didn't argue. I just hugged her and promised to visit. The semester started in September. I transferred to a university 3 hours from Millbrook, a sprawling campus with old buildings and big trees and a library that smelled like paper and history. I was nervous on the first day. My classmates were younger than me, fresher, more confident. They hadn't been broken by the things I'd been broken by. But I'd learned something in Millbrook. I'd learned that being broken wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. That I made friends quickly. There was a girl named Sophie in my marketing class, a literature major named James who sat next to me in business law, and a quiet guy named Leo who worked at the campus coffee shop. They didn't know about my past. They didn't need to. They just knew me as Hannah, the one who always had her homework done on time and never complained about the workload. I started dating again.
Casually. Carefully.
A few coffee dates, a couple of movies, one awkward dinner with a grad student who talked too much about his thesis. Nothing serious. Nothing that made my heart race up. But then I met Alex. That he was a grad student too, but he wasn't like the others. He was quiet in a way that felt deliberate, not shy. He listened more than he talked, and when he did talk, his words were careful and considered. He had dark hair and kind eyes and a smile that made me feel like I was the only person in the room. We met in the library. I was studying for a finance exam, and he was sitting at the table across from me, reading a book about art history. I didn't notice him at first. But then he noticed me and he smiled, and I felt my stomach flip in a way I hadn't felt in years. It terrified me. I wasn't looking for anything. I'd spent so long rebuilding myself that I didn't know if I had room for someone else. But Alex was patient. He didn't push. He just kept showing up, at the library, at the coffee shop, at the campus events I pretended to be interested in. "Can I buy you a coffee?" he asked one afternoon. We were standing in line at the campus cafe, and I was trying to decide between a muffin and a bagel. "I don't date," I said. "I'm not ready." "I'm not asking you to date," he said. "I'm just asking you to have coffee with me. In public. With other people around. It's not a proposal." I laughed. "I couldn't help it, okay?" I said. "One coffee." We sat in the corner of the cafe, and we talked for 3 hours. He told me about his dissertation on Renaissance art. I told him about my plan to get into business management. He didn't flinch when I talked about Millbrook. He didn't ask about Ethan. "Everyone has something in their past," he said when I started to apologize for being cagey. "You don't have to tell me yours. Not until you're ready."
I didn't tell him that night.
Or the next night. Or the night after that. But eventually, over a series of coffee dates that slowly turned into dinner dates that slowly turned into something more, I told him everything almost everything that I told him about Ethan. About the car, about Chloe, about the terrible moment I'd watched my fiancé feed French fries to another woman. I told him about the drive to Millbrook, about Brenda and the diner, and the community college. I told him about rebuilding myself from the ground up. I didn't tell him about the other life. I didn't tell him I'd already lived this once before. Some secrets were too strange to share. Alex listened without interrupting. When I finished, he reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm glad you left him," he said. "I'm glad you found Millbrook. I'm glad you're here." I squeezed his hand. "I'm glad I'm here too." We started dating officially a few weeks later. It wasn't a whirlwind romance. It wasn't the kind of love that sweeps you off your feet and leaves you breathless. It was slower than that. Steadier. It was the kind of love that builds slowly, like a table in Hal's workshop, one careful joint at a time. I didn't say "I love you" for months. And when I finally did, it wasn't in a dramatic moment. It was just a quiet Tuesday night, lying in his bed after a long study session, and the words slipped out. "I love you," I said. And then I froze up, but Alex just smiled. "I know," he said. "I love you too." I started to believe I could have a normal life. A boring life. The kind of life I'd never thought I deserved. But then, in November, I got a call from Ethan that I hadn't heard from him since the letter. I hadn't tried to contact him. I'd assumed he'd moved on, found someone else, built a new life in Boston. The call came from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer it. But something made me pick up. Hannah, it was his voice, but it sounded different. "Hello." "Empty." "Ethan," I said. "What is it? What's wrong?" "I don't know who else to call," he said. His voice cracked. "I don't have anyone else." It was the first time I'd ever heard him sound truly lost. Not angry. Not desperate. Just lost. "What happened?" I asked. "I need to see you," he said. "I know I don't have the right to ask, but I need to see you." I should have said no. I should have hung up. But something in his voice made me pause. "Where are you?" I asked. "Oak Haven," he said. "I'm still in Oak Haven. I never left." That was the first surprise. In all my assumptions, I'd convinced myself he'd moved away, started fresh, forgotten about me. But he hadn't. "Come," he said. "Please. I'll explain everything. Just come." I looked across the room at the tiny wooden bird on my nightstand. It was still there, wings spread, mid-flight. I'd never figured out who sent it. Maybe I never would. But in that moment, I knew what I had to do. "Okay," I said. "I'll come." I drove back to Oak Haven the next morning. The 3-hour trip felt like 3 years. Every mile I covered, the weight in my chest grew heavier. I told myself I was doing this for closure. I told myself I owed him nothing. But the truth was simpler and uglier. I needed to see for myself what had become of him. The town looked the same. Same cracked sidewalks. Same familiar storefronts. Same oak trees lining the streets, their leaves golden and falling. But everything felt smaller now. Less important. Oak Haven had once been the center of my universe. Now it was just a place I used to live. Ethan's house was on Maple Street, a modest 2-bedroom with a porch that sagged on one side. I parked across the street and sat there for a long moment, my hands gripping the steering wheel that I could see him through the front window. He was sitting on the couch, his head in his hands. He looked smaller than I remembered. Diminished that I got out of the car and walked to the front door. It was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The house smelled like takeout and stale air. Dishes were piled in the sink. Clothes were scattered across the furniture. It looked like a man who'd stopped caring. "Hannah." His voice was hoarse. He didn't look up. "You came." "You asked me to," I said. "What happened, Ethan?" He finally lifted his head. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face pale. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Weeks, maybe. Chloe left," he said. "Not just left. She moved. To California. She's getting married to someone else." I sat down on the arm of the couch, not too close. "I'm sorry." "Are you?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I don't expect you to be. I didn't know who else to call. My parents are gone. My friends are tired of me. I've pushed everyone away." "Ethan, do you want to know the worst part?" He looked at me, and there was something raw in his gaze, something I'd never seen before. "I don't even miss Chloe. I miss you." I've been missing you for 2 years, and I don't know how to stop. My throat tightened. You can't say things like that. It's the truth, he said. I know I ruined everything. I know you've moved on. I know you probably hate me. But I can't pretend I don't feel this way. I've tried. God knows I've tried. I stood up. I didn't come here to hear this. What did you come here for? I didn't have an answer. I told myself it was closure. But looking at him now, I realized I'd come because I still cared. Not enough to go back. Not enough to forgive. But enough to worried. I came because you sounded like you needed help, I said. And I'm here to tell you that you don't need me.
You never needed me.
You need to figure out who you are without someone else to lean on. He stared at me. That sounds like something you'd read in a self-help book. Maybe it is, I said. But that doesn't make it wrong. I walked to the door. I was halfway out when he spoke again. Wait, he said.
Please.
There's something I need to show you. I turned back. He was standing now, his hands shaking. What is it? He walked to the bedroom and came back with a small box. It was wrapped in brown paper, identical to the one I'd found on my doorstep months ago. Where did you get that? I asked. I made it, he said. In my workshop. I started woodworking after you left. I thought maybe if I learned to build things, I could learn to rebuild myself. I took the box from him. My hands were shaking. I unwrapped it carefully, and inside was a wooden carving. A bird, wings spread, mid-flight. Identical to the one on my nightstand. You sent it, I said. The bird. You sent it to me. He nodded. I didn't know if you'd keep it. I didn't even know if you'd get it. But I wanted you to have something. Something to remind you that you could fly. I stared at the bird in my hands. The grain of the wood was identical. The craftsmanship was the same. He'd made it. He'd sent it to me, and he'd never told me. Why didn't you say anything? I asked. Because I didn't want you to feel obligated, he said. I just wanted you to know that someone out there believed in you, even if that someone was me. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to feel. Part of me was angry. Angry that he'd inserted himself into my new life without my permission. But part of me was touched. Touched that he'd thought of me. Touched that he'd tried. I have to go, I said. Hannah, thank you, I said. For the bird. It means more than you know. I left before he could say anything else. I got in my car and drove away, the bird still clutched in my hands, but I didn't go back to my apartment. I drove to the park, the one where Ethan had proposed, and sat on a bench, staring at nothing. The bird was in my lap. The same bird I'd been waking up to every morning for months. The same bird that had become a symbol of everything I'd built. I didn't know what to do with it now, and I sat there for an hour. Maybe 2. The sun started to set, and the sky turned gold and pink, the same colors I'd watched from the fire escape in Millbrook. I thought about Alex, about the way he made me feel safe and seen, about the quiet, steady love we were building together. That I thought about Ethan, about the man who'd broken me and the man who'd tried to fix himself, about the bird he'd carved with his own hands, and I thought about myself, the woman I'd become. The woman who'd driven away from a diner with nothing but $42 and a head full of someone else's memories. The woman who'd scrubbed toilets and flipped pancakes and built a life from scratch. I wasn't the same person who'd left Oakhaven. I wasn't the same person who'd sat in that car and watched her fiancé feed French fries to another woman. I was someone new, someone strong, someone who could fly. That I looked down at the bird in my hands and made a decision. That I drove back to Ethan's house. He was still on the couch, still staring at the floor. He looked up when I walked in. I'm not coming back, I said. I need you to understand that. I'm not coming back to you. I'm not coming back to Oakhaven. I've built a new life, and I'm not going to abandon it. He nodded slowly. I know. But I want you to know something, I continued. I don't hate you. I used to. I spent a long time being angry at you, but I don't have the energy for that anymore. You were broken and you broke me, but I'm not broken anymore. And I hope you're not either. I'm trying, he said. I really am. I know, I said. That's why I'm here. I wanted to tell you that I forgive you, not because you deserve it, because I deserve peace. He stared at me. There were tears in his eyes.
Thank you, he said.
I don't know if I deserve that. Maybe not, I said. But I'm giving it to you anyway. Goodbye, Ethan. I turned and walked out the door. This time, I didn't look back. I drove back to Millbrook that night. The 3-hour trip felt shorter this time. Lighter. Like I'd left something heavy behind in Oakhaven. The motel sign was still flickering its broken vacancy glow when I pulled into town. It was past midnight, and the streets were empty. I parked outside my apartment and sat there for a moment, staring at the familiar cracked sidewalk, the closed bakery below my window, the faint light coming from Brenda's place next door. I was home. The next morning, I walked into the Rusty Spoon like nothing had happened. Brenda was behind the counter, polishing coffee mugs with that same intensity she always had. She looked up when I walked in, and her eyes narrowed. "You look different," she said. "I feel different," I said. She didn't ask where I'd been. She didn't ask what I'd done. She just poured me a cup of coffee and slid it across the counter. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked. "Not really." "Good. Then get to work. The breakfast rush is about to start." I tied on my apron and got to work. It felt good to be back in the rhythm of things. The familiar chaos of the diner, the familiar faces of the truckers, the familiar smell of coffee and grease. It had become home in a way I never expected, but something had changed. I could feel it in the way I moved, in the way I laughed, in the way I looked at the regulars and saw them differently. I'd gone back to Oakhaven to find closure, and I'd found something I hadn't expected: peace. 2 weeks later, Alex came to visit. He'd never been to Millbrook before, and I watched him take it in with that careful, deliberate gaze of his. The boarded-up storefronts, the faded signs, the stray cat that had adopted the motel and still slept on the office steps. "It's not much," I said, a little defensive. "It's you," he said. "That's enough." I showed him everything. The Rusty Spoon, where Brenda hugged him like he was a long-lost son. The community college, where I'd taken my first classes. The lumberyard, where I'd met Jane and learned that the future wasn't fixed. The workshop, where Hal taught me how to make a table dot, and I showed him the bird, the one Ethan had carved. It was still on my nightstand, wings spread, mid-flight. Alex picked it up and turned it over in his hands. "It's beautiful," he said. "It's complicated." I said, "Most beautiful things are." We sat on the fire escape that night, watching the sunset over the plains. The sky was gold and pink, the kind of sunset I'd come to love. Alex was quiet, his arm around my shoulders. "I'm going to graduate next spring," I said. "I've been thinking about what comes after." "What have you been thinking?" "I don't want to stay here forever," I said. "But I don't want to leave either. I want to find a middle ground, maybe open my own business. Something small, something that matters." He smiled. "That sounds like you."
Will you be part of it? I asked.
It came out smaller than I'd intended, more vulnerable. "I'll be part of anything you want," he said. "You know that." I didn't say anything. I just leaned into him and watched the sunset. A few months later, I graduated. My mother came to the ceremony, and my father came too. He'd changed, just like my mother said. Quieter.
Softer.
He shook my hand and said he was proud of me, and I almost cried. We'd spent so many years not understanding each other. It felt good to finally start. Brenda came too. She sat in the front row and clapped louder than anyone when I walked across the stage. Maria and Derek were there, and Sophie and James and Leo, and all the people who'd become my family. Alex was in the front row, wearing a suit I'd never seen before, his eyes bright with pride. When I walked off the stage, he was the first one to hug me. "I'm so proud of you," he said. "I couldn't have done it without you." I said. He laughed. "You could have. But I'm glad you didn't have to." After the ceremony, we all went to a restaurant downtown. The kind of place with white tablecloths and candles and waiters who called you sir and ma'am. It was the kind of place I'd never imagined I'd be able to afford, but tonight it felt right. My father made a toast. It was awkward and stumbling, the kind of speech you make when you're not used to expressing emotion. But I heard the love underneath it, and I let myself feel it. "I'm sorry," he said, pulling me aside later.
"For everything.
For never standing up for you. For letting Ethan treat you the way he did. I should have done more." "You did what you could," I said. "It wasn't enough." "Maybe not," I said. But it's a start. He nodded. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. That night, I lay in bed with Alex, staring at the ceiling. The bird was on the nightstand, catching the moonlight. It had been months since Ethan sent it. Months since I'd seen him. I didn't know where he was now. I didn't know if he'd ever gotten his life together. But I'd stopped worrying. I'd stopped wondering. The future was something I was no longer afraid of. I started my business 6 months later. A small furniture shop on the edge of downtown Millbrook, just down the street from the Rusty Spoon. I called it Flight, after the bird. It was a risk. Everything I'd saved, everything I'd built, poured into one tiny storefront. But I believed in it. I believed in myself. The shop opened on a cold November morning, exactly 3 years after I'd driven away from that diner in Oak Haven. The same month, the same season, the same kind of gray sky, but I was different. I was whole. Brenda cut the ribbon with a pair of rusty scissors she'd brought from the diner. Hal was there, and Maria and Derek and all the people who'd helped me become who I was. Alex stood next to me, his hand in mine. "Welcome to Flight," I said. "Welcome to everything I've built." The regulars came. The truckers. The old man who read 2-day-old newspapers. They walked through the shop, running their hands over the furniture, nodding in approval. I watched them, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Joyed that night, I closed the shop and sat alone in the back room. The bird was on my desk, the one Ethan had carved. I'd brought it with me from the apartment, a reminder of where I'd been and how far I'd come. I picked it up and turned it over in my hands. The grain of the wood was smooth, the edges soft. It had been a gift from someone who'd broken me. It had been a reminder that I could fly. I put it down and looked out the window. The sun was setting over the plains, gold and pink and endless. The same sun that had been setting for centuries, over this town, over this life, over everything I'd ever known. I didn't know what the future would bring. I didn't know if Alex and I would stay together forever. I didn't know if the shop would succeed. I didn't know if I'd ever see Ethan again. But I knew one thing. I was no longer the woman who'd sat in that car. I was no longer the woman who'd waited. I was no longer the woman who'd let herself be made small. I was the woman who'd driven away. And I was the woman who'd found her way back. I picked up the bird one last time, and I smiled. Then I put it back on my desk, turned off the light, and walked out into the night.